Hello, and welcome to your Extensions Program New Teacher Support Series session, a deep dive into data. Today, we're going to talk about what is educational data, academic classroom data, pretest, post-test, checkpoints, IEP goals, benchmarks, and behavioral and functional data. First, let's start by answering the question, what is data and why do we take it? What is educational data? Educational data is a broad term that refers to a variety of information collected about students for the purpose of guiding instructional changes and modifying behavioral support. Educational data should be used to progress monitor IEP goals, measure the effectiveness of instruction, measure the effectiveness of interventions for behavior, academics, and functional interventions, determine which topics and content matters need to be retaught, determine skill gaps and skill deficits, and identify strengths of students and windows of opportunity. Let's talk about some different types of academic and instructional data. First, we're going to talk about pre-tests and post-tests. We collect pre-post data in order to determine the effectiveness of instruction. This allows us to know if the student has any substantial prior knowledge of a topic before the content instruction begins. It also lets us know what components we may need to be retaught. Let's look at an example of a template for pre-post data collection. On this template, you can see a couple different components. So first, we have the answer key up here. So here is where you would put the question that is answered. Pause, pause, pause. Wait, wait, wait. So here you see the pre-post template for data collection. Let me give you a little bit of a tour of this document. So here you see the answer key, which explains that the plus mark means that it was answered correctly, and the minus mark indicates that the question was answered incorrectly. You also see prompting levels. So we have I, which is independent response, G, gestural, V, verbal, M would be teacher or parent models. PP is a partial physical prompt, and FP is a full physical prompt. So those prompting levels refer to the hierarchy of prompts and what level of prompting is given in order to elicit that response from the student. So if I were filling out this document, I would say the date that it was given. So here we just have an example of 3/23/2020. And then I would say what was the assignment. So let's say that I'm doing math lesson geometry. Just as an example. And then I would go through and I would give a plus or a minus depending on how they did for the pretest. So let's say I give the pretest and it says they get the first one right, but then they get this one wrong. And then they do this one incorrect. So essentially, what you're going to be doing is going through and answering those questions, and then it's going to give the total over here. And then when you go to do the post test, you are going to answer those post test questions, and then it's going to give the post test total over here. And you are going to be able to use those data points to compare them here. So if they got a total of, let's say, 3 points on the pretest and 5 points on the post-test, well, then you know that the instruction was pretty effective. But it's not only for that, it is so that you can start seeing trends too. Like, let's say the student um, is doing really well on the first three questions, but then consistently the fourth and fifth question, they're getting wrong or they're not responding, no response. That might be something that you can start taking data on and say, like, hey, this student has a stamina for three questions, but once we get to four and five, then we start to lose stamina a little bit and it's impacting accuracy. So there's lots of ways that you can use data, but that's just one example of a way that you might not just use this for accuracy or effectiveness of instruction. So that's how you would use that pre-post data collection tool. Another cool piece of pre-post data is the checkpoints that are in unique learning systems. So ULS has built-in pre-post tests every month that connect directly with the monthly lessons. The checkpoints should be given before the lesson is taught and after the lesson is taught to measure the effectiveness of instruction. So let me take you on a little tour of that. So first you go to unique learning systems, and then you go to GPS, and then you're going to select your student. I'm going to use my sample student here. And then you're going to go to unit checkpoints. So when you want to administer a checkpoint, you just go to administer checkpoint, and then you can either assign that checkpoint or you can give it directly. So if you are going to give it, you are just going to, let's say, do pretest. And then let's see where we're at. Okay, let me use lesson 11 as an example here. Let's use lesson 12. Okay, so you're going to choose the grade band that they're in. So preschool, elementary, intermediate, middle school, or high school. And that's going to make sure that they have the correct um, assignment. And then you're going to choose the test. So either they're level one, so you might be doing the combined content, the reading and the math combined into one test. Or if they're level two and three, you would give them separately. So if your student is a differentiated level two or three, you are going to give separate assessments. Let's say you're doing one for reading and one for math. So you would give those separately. Let's go to pretest, and then you would just say run test. And the verification code is their full name. And I just want to show you what this looks like. So when you go to run that test, it is going to look like this. So you'll say start. And then you're going to have what you're going to read on the bottom. So response opinion may only be present verbally. Okay. So dish and dad begin with the same sound. Show me the one that begins like dish and dad, and then you'll have the student make the selection. Boop. And then if they get it correct, it's going to move on to the next one. Or if they get it incorrect, it's going to move on to the next one. And it will only take away an option, I believe, in the post test. Let me check that though. I might be incorrect. Nib and nest. Okay, so let's say I do. Boop. Okay, so yes, in the pretest, it's just going to keep going. So it's not going to take one of the options away, even if they get it incorrect. But in the post test, it is going to take one of the options away, which will model extend one. All right, so you just go through here and you do the test with your kiddo, and it's going to be boop, 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 content, content, content. These are also great data points for IEP goals. Okay, and then once the test is complete, it's going to give you the accuracy score, and you are going to save and exit, and that's going to be your pretest. You're going to teach the lesson, and then at the end of the month, you are going to give the post test. Once you give the post test, it is going to give you a really great overview of the data. I'm going to show you some of that. So it gives you the test history. So when I'm looking at this kid, I gave them the pre and post for 11, 13, 14, 15. So you have all this data here. And then it will also give you more specific data on which they got correct and which they got incorrect, what it looks like pre to post. And you can start drawing conclusions from this data. So over time, they will have a pretty good amount of data as they work through all of the checkpoints throughout the school year. That you might see some trends though. So like let's say that your student starts off every single lesson really struggling with vocabulary or struggling with identifying words with same initial, just as an example. But then after the lesson, they take their post test and they're doing great. They are yellow or green. So they're always showing growth. That will be an example of knowing that this information, this content is effective. If you see that lesson to lesson, like unit to unit, then you can start seeing some trends there. If you see that students are right across the board when they're answering who and what questions, this might tell you that that would be a good IEP goal for the student. Perhaps you are not focusing enough on those who and what questions, and that might be something that you want to isolate for more reteaching and more coverage, more intervention for your students. So, those are just two examples of how you might use this data. So, some types of classroom data to be taken during instruction. So, these are just some examples. So, you can do data on participation, such as like the use of assistive technology or response time or level of prompting. So, we talked about level of prompting a few moments ago. That is those the independent, verbal, gestural, modeling, partial physical, full physical. Those are examples of the level of prompting. So, if you are finding that a student currently requires a partial physical, so maybe like a tap on the shoulder or a tap on the elbow to get them to touch an answer or engage in something in the classroom, you might want to take data on how you are removing that level of prompting. So they might need a partial physical now, but you might be looking at interventions to try and help them gain independence. So maybe using lights or using sounds as prompts. Like this is something that you can take academic data on. And really, it's functional and academic data because you're working to increase independence. So that's just an example. Or maybe you're trying to make a change in response time. Maybe you have a student who takes 14 seconds to respond. That's their response time. And you're working on encouraging them to minimize their response time. We understand that our students have a response time delay. That is something that some of our students just have. But we want to make sure that students are living up to their maximum potential and we're making sure that we're encouraging them to decrease that response time if it's possible. It's a very functional skill. So you might want to take data on that. And then checking for understanding. Checking for understanding is something that you can do throughout a lesson just to make sure that kids are paying attention, that what you just discussed is immediately understood. Yeah, we might ask our pre-test questions at the beginning of the lesson and ask some post-test questions at the end of the lesson, and we might see like, okay, that they did not retain all that information. That's okay. But if I tell you something on a slide and then I immediately ask you the question right after, that's me checking for immediate understanding. If I say, the dog is in the house. And then I say, where is the dog? Is the dog in the house or is he at school? And you say at school, that tells me right there and then that you did not synthesize what I just said to you. So if all the kids in your class say the dog is in the school, that's when I would go back to that slide and be like, guys, we just said the dog is in the house. Where is the dog? And then I might show them the house, bring it around. Where's the dog? The dog is in the house. Give them an errorless opportunity to answer the question. That is just you putting those checks in place to make sure that you are making the most of your time when you're teaching, checking for that understanding. Next, we're going to talk about IEP goal data collection. So, all classroom data can be used for the purpose of progress monitoring goals and objectives. So, if you have a student whose IEP goal is to, and I wouldn't recommend writing a goal like this, but sometimes they exist, to attend to math related activities in 4 to 5 trials. I think that's a silly goal because our goals are supposed to be standards based, but let's just say you have that. Well, if you have a goal like that, you can literally take data every time you teach math because you're taking data on whether or not they're attending to math. So you better have a bunch of data on a goal that's as loose as that. Let's say you have a data goal or a goal for your students, an IEP goal for counting. Well, you can involve counting in any lesson. You could start every lesson by counting to 10 or counting to 20. There is counting. You can build it into the lesson. Just because you take data during the lesson doesn't mean you can't use it for IEP goal data. If you know that one of your students or three of your students have a counting goal, that's a cue for your TAs or even you, if you're taking your own data, to say, okay, we're about to count. That means Bobby, Jerry, and Carol need to have their counting data goal noted upon. Did they do it? Did they not do it? That stuff can be built into instruction and should be built into instruction because you do not have enough time in the day to monitor goals every single day, right? In fact, you want to make sure that you're progress monitoring each goal at least twice per week. That is going to be enough sessions for you. You are going to be overwhelmed at what 2 times per week per goal looks like for each kid. So if you can build it into small group and whole group, then do it. It's going to make your life easier. And the data is not any less effective or meaningful just because it was done during whole group or during small group. Now, that being said, it's important to also take the time to do individual student IEP goal data because if it if their data is skewed by being in a group or being in small group, you want to also be taking data on that data. So if you find that in whole group, your student is answering with 40% accuracy, but when they're one-to-one, when they're getting individual support, they're answering with 100% accuracy, that's relevant data. It's relevant to be able to say that their accuracy increases when they're receiving a higher level of support. So all data is good data. If you're taking good data, you're never wasting your time because data can be used for a variety of different reasons. There's lots of ways to use our data. Even if your data is that the student refuses. Refusal data is just as relevant as participatory data. So having a record of your attempts to get a student to respond and their choice not to respond is extremely relevant. You want to be taking data and making those opportunities possible no matter what. You never want to say, well, I try all the time and he never wants to sit down and work. Okay, well then you need to be taking data on all the times that you've tried and all the times that he's refused because that is relevant too. That is functional and behavioral data, and you're going to want that too if you're going to be moving forward and putting interventions in place. So let's take a look at some of these options for data collection. So over here, you can see the goal tracker, and I'm going to show you that too, but this is an example of a progress or an IEP progress monitoring tool. At the top, you can put the goal. You can just circle reading, math, written expression. You can write the goal in there. And then you're going to put the date and you're going to put the level of prompting. So this is independent, verbal, gestural. We have modeling, full physical, and partial physical. So you'll just circle. And then here you put the mastery. So I usually like to put check marks in here. So let's say I'm giving them 5 opportunities to identify the appropriate symbol to complete a mathematic equation that compares values. So I'm giving them 5 and 8 and asking them what goes here, greater than or less than. And let's say that I give them 5 opportunities and they get it right, I don't know, 1 time. Well, then I'm going to write 1 out of 5 in there. And then the next time I do a data point, so let's say that's Monday and I do it Mondays and Thursdays. On Thursday, I'm going to put the date, put the level of prompting, and then I'm going to say, oh, they got it in 5 out of 5 times. That's amazing. Does that mean they mastered the goal and I can move on? I never have to progress monitor it again? No, because I like to make sure that my maintenance is built into my goal. So I'm going to get this at least 3 times before I just say, oh, it's done. Because as much of a fluke as 0% can be, 100% can be a fluke too. It happens. So you want to be taking consistent data. And then at the end of the quarter, I usually don't bother to add everything up and do my percentages as I go. That just depends on your style. But when I'm entering it at the end of the quarter or maybe halfway mark in the quarter, so that I can really be like informing making data based decisions, that's when I'll add up that 1 divided by 5, or if I did it out of 4, 2 divided by 4, whatever it may be. And that's going to give me my mastery percentage. Let's look at the goal tracker. All right, so this is the master copy of the IEP Progress Monitoring Goal Tracker. And then if you want to watch the tutorial video, it's built into all of the trackers. But I'll just give you a quick overview here. All right, so when you're looking at the goal tracker, you're going to see IEP goal example because this one's an example. You're going to put the IEP goal here, service time. So like when are they being served, math, reading, whatever it may be. Then you're going to put the date, the location, the format of delivery, and then you're going to describe the specially designed instructions. So if you are teaching using number worlds or you're teaching using unique learning systems, attainment, that's where you're going to put the type of specially designed instruction in there. And then you're going to select your method of progress monitoring. So this really depends on your method of progress monitoring. But if you're using that data sheet that we looked at, then you're going to select data sheets, because what you're going to be doing is taking the data from that data sheet and putting it into your tracker. And let me show you what this will look like. So let's say 11.4, 11.5, 11.6, 11.7, and then we just did special ed for all these. Boop, boop. Because I want to show you what this looks like. And all my data's in person, but if you teach homebound or if you're remote, then obviously you pick remote, but all my stuff is in person. And then for specially designed instruction, I did ULS. And data sheets. Okay, so let's say I was giving 4 opportunities and that it was out of 4. I like 4 because that makes it really easy to add up, right? So the first time I did it, they got 1 out of 4, so they got 25% on that. And then the second time I did it, they got 25% again. And then the third time I did it, oh, they got 50%. Awesome. And then the fourth time I did it, oh, they got 0%. Okay, it was an off day. All right, and you're putting all of your data points in here, right? So you're taking that data sheet, you're entering all those points. And the reason you're doing that is because it's going to make a very pretty little graph over here. This graph is very helpful when you're trying to visualize your data. And it's helpful when you're talking about trends. So like if I'm just going through the school year, like just really taking all my data points, all that stuff. And let's talk about what this trend looks like. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the data points that I just did. So this is like, let's just say 12, 4, 12. Promise this is worth it because I'm going to ask you a question about it. So just give me a second. Okay, so let's say I'm looking at my data, right? all that work and I put the wrong dates in. Okay. So I'm entering this data and it's the end of the quarter, or let's say they're due for an IEP. And I'm sitting here like, okay, let me look at this data and see what these trends are. I need to write some new goals. Okay. And I look at this data and I'm like, wow, at the beginning of this quarter, he was doing really great. He started off kind of low, but then he made steady progress. And by the time we got to like mid December, he was doing really great. He was 75 to 100% accuracy. Awesome. Looking really good. And then we came back from winter break and it was 25, 25 again. We had 2 zeros and up to 25. What this might tell me, what this data might tell me, is that he regressed over a long period of break. It's literally the data that you need to qualify somebody for extended school year, right? And if you have this little chart and you send this in when you're making the qualification for extended school year, who can argue with this data? The instruction didn't change. He was showing steady growth on his IEP goal with the interventions. And then as soon as he comes back from break, all of a sudden it is delayed again. So he just tanked in his accuracy. I'll do you one better. Let's say you keep taking data, right? So we got 2, 1. You take some more data, right? And you're starting to think about that ESY consideration. And when you look at the data, you see like, oh, okay, like not only did he have a regression over the break, but eventually he was able to make up the gains that were lost. So, what that tells me with this student is, yeah, he had a regression over a break. So, after a break, he regressed. And then it took about a month to regain that progress. That's a problem because it's a month lost in the continuum for this kid, right? So, when you're looking for evidence for extended school year, you can say, yeah, this kid is going to regain what's lost, but look how long it took for him to regain what was lost. It was like over a month. That's not time that we have to lose. And it's not like he's achieving at 100. It might take 2 months for him to get back to the point where he's achieving at 100. So this would be great data to use as an example of for a student who regresses over an extended break. So it's just an example of how you can use the data tracker. And what I like to do is I like to make a tab for each goal. So I'll duplicate it and I'll just make one for math, reading, written expression, behavior, however many goals you have. And this is my favorite tool to use when it comes to tracking data for my IEP goals. Another cool thing that is built into unique learning systems is the benchmarks. And all extension programs teachers are required to administer at least 2 reading and 2 math benchmarks at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the school year. The ULS benchmarks are skill based assessments and they provide excellent probes for IEP goal progress monitoring. When you complete the benchmark, the system will also generate a present level based on the results. So I want to show you what that looks like because it is so cool. So if you're giving a benchmark, you're going to come to the GPS. And remember, I said at least 2 reading and math 3 times a year. You can do as many of these as you want. Please don't feel limited by that because anytime you are considering possibly doing an IEP goal or if you need present levels, don't be afraid to come in to the benchmarks and use it for those present levels. So I'm going to find my sample student who is in second grade. And the EC department has required me to do 2 benchmarks in reading. So let's say that I start off, my kiddo's in second grade. So let's say this is where they're at. They're working on letter identification. This is still a skill they need support with. And so I'm going to give this benchmark. And let's do this together. You'll start that benchmark, and you're reading this aloud to them. This is the letter S. Choose the letter that matches S. Choose the letter that matches O. Oh, choose the or this is the letter Z. Choose the letter that matches Z. Boop. I'm really trying, but I'm just struggling here. Just trying to do my best, make my way through. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going through the test. Okay. So you finish, right? And it gives you the score 10 out of 15. Here's the really cool thing that it does. So once you finish that assessment, it's going to data point. So this is cool because if you give this at the beginning, middle, and end of the year, it is going to show you if they are improving or if they are not improving. The other cool thing it does is it gives you a summary. And I like to use this for my present levels on the IEP. It is the most data driven, fantastic little summary. It's going to tell you exactly how they did. On this specific example, it says that the sample student was able to do letter matching from errorless field with 100% accuracy, that they were able to select the matching letter from a field of 3 choices with 100% accuracy. They cannot yet consistently choose the matching letter from a field of 2, scoring 1 out of 3. So see how it actually reports the data. And this is a great thing. I copy and paste this right into my present levels because this is a data-driven piece of information. That's what the summary is based off of. So that's a really cool thing to have. All right, so let's talk about some behavioral and functional data. So there are two types of behavior you might see in the classroom. We have maladaptive behaviors and desired behaviors. Maladaptive behaviors are behaviors that can interfere with a person's ability to function in their daily lives or to adapt to different situations. They can range from minor behaviors like nail biting to more serious behaviors like self injury. A desired behavior can refer to actions or responses that are in line with expectations or goals. We write IEP goals to target and develop desired behaviors. These desired behaviors serve to replace or decrease maladaptive behaviors. Here are some suggestions for frequency and duration data collection. So, frequency data refers to the number of times a specific value appears within a data set. So, how many times? The duration is the measure of how long a behavior or event lasts from start to finish. So, let's take a look at some frequency data tools. So when you click on frequency, it's going to bring you to the whole frequency folder, and you can take a look at these and see which one fits your needs best. I like event recording. I also like the frequency that has a little bit of a duration piece because I like my stuff to be time stamped. So let me just show you this one. This is frequency every 30 minutes, right? So there's a little bit of duration to it. How many times in 30 minutes? So if you have a student who, let's say they are pinching, right? Or self injury, it doesn't really matter. So here it says target behavior, and you would put pinching or um, self injury or eloping, whatever it is. And you're just going to write that little description there, and you're going to place a tally mark under the section that is appropriate. So if you're taking data on Monday, let's say it's Monday the 18th, and you're taking data on how many times the student pinches. If it's 7 to 7:30, let's say he does it once when he first comes in the room, you're going to do one tally mark there. Let's say from 7:30 to 8:30, you guys are eating breakfast and he doesn't pinch. Okay, no tallies there. But then you move into math and he does not like math. So you might have 5 or 6 tallies where he is just pinching, 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 trying to avoid math, right? And you know he does not like to do math, so this is no surprise to you. What you're going to see as you chart this data is you're going to see trends. If you have a bunch of pinches, from 7 to 7:30, you know that there is something significant about arrival time for him. It increases the behavior. If you're seeing no pinches from 7:30 to 8:30 and you know that's during breakfast every single day, okay, like there's some significance to that. When he is given food or when he's preoccupied by a preferred task, we don't get as much pinching. If math is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8:30 to 9:30 and pinches go like out the wall like crazy on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can start making the correlation between that as a non-preferred task and he is trying to exhibit a behavior to avoidance, like he wants to avoid math, so he's pinching. And let's say on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you guys don't see that, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you have specials at that time. Okay, well, what that's telling me is that he's not struggling as much with transition as much as like doing non preferred tasks. So, like, he likes math and, I'm sorry, he likes art and music on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we don't get any pinching for art and music. That tells us that a non preferred task is math and that he is using pinching to avoid that task or to communicate that he does not want to participate in math. So that's just data. You can start seeing those trends. And then you go through the day, right? And you're going to start seeing other trends. Like maybe at lunch, he's not pinching, but then maybe on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he leaves early at 12 o'clock for ABA, but on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, he does not leave early. And you're noticing that at 12 o'clock on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, he is starting to have an increase in behaviors because he's expecting to leave. That tells me that this student is getting frustrated because he's expecting to go home, right? So you might want to use a visual schedule. You might have to want to have conversations with mom or dad about how you're seeing these trends work out in his school day. Like just making sure that they understand that you're tracking the behavior and that you are noticing some trends on the days that he's not leaving early. Okay, so that is just an example of how you might use this frequency tracker. Let's look at the duration options. So duration, it is going to give you, let's take a look here. We have one for feeding. Let that. Let's just do this one. All right, so this is going to give you just a clear way to lay out the duration. So it tells you the date, the setting, so like just when and where, and then you're going to track when it starts, when it stops, and then here you're going to put the total amount of time. That's a pretty straightforward collection of data. Now, personally, I like to add a duration piece to my frequency tracker. And I do that because a lot of times I am noting the frequency and I'm also noting the duration. So on this one, for example, this is going to be straightforward. These are going to be tallies. That's going to be the easiest way to do that. But if I did, let's see, maybe like a more, here we go. If I did this one, I might do the number of events and then I might do see length of observation. So maybe like here I might put duration. I might put something in here so I could also note the duration, but that's like for coexisting things. And we're actually going to talk about that a little more in a second. So like maybe you're taking your frequency data, maybe you're also taking duration data separately. Let's talk about ABC data and we'll talk about how to like kind of combine these data collection tools into like an overall ABC data collection tool. So the goal of ABC data behavior is to understand and manage behaviors by recording what happens before and after a behavior. This data collection method is used to identify triggers and maintain factors for behavior, which also allows for effective intervention plans. So, an antecedent is what happens immediately before a behavior occurs. This could be a specific event, environmental cue, or a trigger. Behavior is the observable and measurable actions or reactions of an individual, and the consequence is what happens right after the behavior. Here are some examples of some different data collection tools for monitoring ABC data. Let's look at some of these. So this is a pretty typical tool. The great thing about these tools is they're going to be pretty easy to use for anyone in the classroom. So you have the student name, you have an example of some antecedents that might be happening right before the behavior. Then you have the challenging behavior listed here. And then you'll have like the date, the place, what activity was going on, who was observing it. And then you have the ABC listed here. So the antecedent, the behavior, what the possible function of the behavior is, and the consequence, what happens directly after the behavior. So that is an example of one ABC data tracker. This is the one that I always use. So it's different for everybody. Like you have to use the one that works for you. This one works for me. And the reason this one works for me is because I'm able to personalize it so that my teacher's assistants or whoever supported me in the classroom can easily use this too. So in the date section, I actually will usually remove the date column because if I'm taking ABC data on a kid, chances are it's not something that's happening once a day. It's probably happening more frequently than once a day. If I'm taking ABC data on a student, it's typically happening multiple times a day. Like we're to a point where we're really tracking this data significantly. If you want to keep date over there, you can just keep rewriting the date. I like to make one for every single day. So I'll make the date and then I'll put time over here. That's just an option. You need to make this tool work for you. So you can change it to be per day and you can put the times over here. It's whatever works best for you in tracking this data. With the antecedent, I will sometimes put options here for my support people to just check off. If we kind of have an idea of possible antecedents like task avoidance, sensory overload, transitioning, non-preferred task presentation, denial of going home, things that we know can trigger a student, I'll just write those in here so that it's as easy as just checking which one happened, anything that can make this process faster. Then the behavior. If you don't know the behavior, I guess you can leave this blank. I personally try to figure out the behaviors that we are targeting that we're taking data on. And I put a checklist here too. Biting, eloping, spitting, whatever it is, make yourself a little list. And then that way you can just check it as you go. Then you know it's like, oh, at this time, the student was asked to transition and they bit. There you go. Quick, quick, quick. And then, like I said before, remember I was saying I like to add duration to my data tracker. Well, duration is on here and you probably don't need a little checkbox for this, but you could. You could say less than a minute, less than 5 minutes, less than 10 minutes, greater than 30 minutes. That way you just check it as you go, make it super quick. And then consequence. The thing about the consequence is usually the consequence is going to be the same. That's usually part of your crisis plan. You have decided with your team, what are we going to do when this happens? And that might be returning to the non-preferred task. It might be going to the sensory corner to decompress. It might be having a conversation about the behavior that just happened. It might be um, I don't know, returning to a safe spot or independent workstation, something like that. Like, what is going to happen after student spits on you? Are they going to what happens when student throws objects? Are we going to ask them to clean them up? Or are we going to ask them to return to their desk? Are we going to ask them to set a timer until they calm down and then have them go clean up the blocks? Whatever it might be, have those consequences put in here so that you can just check it off. Which one did you guys decide to do? The thing about this section is you shouldn't be changing the consequence so much that you can't just write 4 or 5 possible reactions in here. Because if you have too many consequences to create a checkbox here, then you have too many consequences. Like, Kids are not going to understand correlation if you're doing 10 different things depending on who's in the room and, what time of day it is and what the weather's like. Like, you need to decide, if so and so bites you, are you going to have them return to their desk to calm down and set a timer? Or are you going to have them go sit in the sensory area to calm down? Like, what are you going to have them do as a response to a behavior? What's going to happen? And then the perceived function. So, this is just your hypothesis, what you think is the function of the behavior. Just understand that the antecedent and the function they can be the same, but they're usually different, right? So if your antecedent, or what happens before, was a transition, the transition isn't the function of the behavior. The escape or avoidance of the transition is the function of the behavior, right? So it's your hypothesis. What's your hypothesis of the reason? So the antecedent is really just what happens. It's an event. So if the event that happens before is going to an assembly or walking into the gym, and that is what triggers the behavior, you can say that it's probably sensory stimulation that caused it. Overstimulation. So I hope that makes sense. And then I just have on here, did you use CPI intervention? And if you did, then you circle yes. If not, no. And then over here is just any additional comments. So, like, if he bit you and broke the skin and you had to go to the nurse and fill out a report, you might want to put that stuff in there. The next type of data that you might take in the classroom is task analysis. Task analysis is a method for breaking down a complex task into smaller steps to help teach or understand how to complete it. So, task analysis can be used by teachers to break down complex skills into smaller ones, into more manageable steps to teach the learner. Let's take a look at this task analysis recording sheet. So, let's say you are breaking down the steps of going to the bathroom, just start to finish, what it takes. So you are going to start by communicating that you need to use the bathroom. So maybe the student has a picture symbol on their desk that says bathroom, or they have a sign that they use to tell you that they need to go to the bathroom. So that's step one. Tell me you need to go to the bathroom. Step two, navigate to the bathroom. Step three, enter the stall. Step four, use the bathroom. Step five, wipe after using the bathroom. Step six, wash your hands. Step seven, dry your hands. Step eight, return to your desk. So you got 8 steps there that break down the process of going to the bathroom. And you are going to take data on how they do those steps. So over there, you have the steps, and over there you have how they are completing those steps. I usually do a check or a minus if it's completed. And then you just go through, you take that data. How are they doing on those steps? Da, 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 da. Let's say you take data for 3 weeks and you're like, okay, we're doing really great at identifying when we have to go to the bathroom, and we're doing really great going to the bathroom and using the bathroom independently and wiping and making sure that we are ready to go. But then we get to hand washing and we're just not doing that. That part is not happening. So, what you could say at that point is, this task analysis recording sheet, you did your job. We don't need to keep recording the tasks 1 through 4. We are good there. Let's move on and break down hand washing into a task analysis. So, then you start your new task analysis for the steps of hand washing. So, you might break it down to wet your hands, grab some soap, wash or rub your hands together for 10 seconds, rinse your hands with water, grab a paper towel, dry your hands, throw away the paper towel, return to your seat. All of a sudden, one step that was in your previous task analysis has its own 8 steps, and you're going to start reviewing those steps, and you're going to take data on it, and you're going to see which areas they need the most support in. Maybe they are doing great with most of the steps, but they are really struggling with the steps that avoid water. All right, then you have to start thinking about that. Ooh, do they have like an aversion to water? Is there a reason? Do they not like the sound that the sink is making? Like, these are, I know this seems crazy. sometimes I say this stuff out loud and I think, oh, that sounds a little crazy. It's not crazy. You are using data to figure out, like explicitly, you're making a data driven observation. We can't just look and say, like, oh, it seems like he's having a hard time with the water. No, if you take task analysis and you're seeing that he is stuck at the water step of the process every single time, that's data that shows like we may have like a problem with the water component. Let's see what we need to do to help work through this water piece. And you might break it down into an even smaller task analysis. And you might say, we need to have some exposure to the sink during not hand washing time so that we can become more comfortable turning on the water, whatever it is. We are teaching these kids the most important things that they are ever going to need in their life. And one of those things is how to bathroom independently. And you can feel great about yourself if you start the year with a student who is not bathrooming independently. And through task analysis, you teach them explicitly how to bathroom, ask to go to the bathroom themselves, and wash their hands. There's nothing really in this world more rewarding than giving somebody that level of independence. This could go with feeding. This is bathrooming. This might be more complex things like, researching information. Like everything can be broken into a task analysis or the steps on that you see job site here. I think more specifically, it might be broken down into job tasks, making a pizza box, like assembling a piece of equipment or like steps to appropriately cleaning dishes, like whatever it may be, break it down to a task analysis. We have to make it in small, palatable steps. All right, some other functional data that you might be taking in the classroom would be a bathroom log, a sleeping log, a social and pragmatic log, a log of the prompting hierarchy, preferences or opinion based responses, or correlation data. And what I mean by correlation data is sometimes we need to take data to show that there is a correlation between consistent events and behavior, for example. So, like if a student is having very poor attendance and you're seeing that the behavior has increased since attendance has been poor, that would be correlation. And you would have data to support that if you're taking data on that. In that example, the attendance that you're taking every day is one piece of data. The behavior that you're monitoring is another piece of data. And when you bring those two pieces of data together and make comparisons, that's correlation data. Another thing might be leaving early or arriving late in behavior. Like I said, your attendance is the one piece of data. So them leaving early or arriving late, and the behavior data that you're taking is the other piece of data. When you bring them together, that's when you find out if there's a correlation. Diet and sleep. I put these on here specifically because I have had circumstances where these have been something that I had to monitor. So, we had situations where students had like a significant increase in sleeping in school, right? And we were able to find out like through tracking it, tracking the sleeping, and then there was a natural tracking of the things that we were eating in school that they were having trouble with carbohydrates and bread, and that it was making them really sleepy when we had pasta. And then eventually we were able to find out that the student had type 2 diabetes. So like we are not doctors, but we can definitely see some correlations where it's like, hey, like, so and so eats a banana and they are out. Like they're out like a light, sleepy kid, can't keep them awake after a dessert, so those types of things we can see and provide the data. And then, medically, what a doctor or a parent might do with it, that's their choice. You might also see a correlation between diet and behavior. This specific example was brought to my attention by a parent who is concerned with certain ingredients in food, but like they understood that it was something that we had in our school lunches. And anyway, so we were taking behavior data and seeing increases when the student was eating certain foods, certain types of foods, and eventually they were able to get supported because they were having acid reflux and that was increasing their behavior. Like these are things that like when you have students who are nonverbal communicators who aren't able to communicate what they're feeling, gosh, I know like I don't
know if I would be able to tell you if I had acid reflux, like I don't have experience with that. So I'm sure the first time that happened would be really confusing, especially if you are little and you're not able to research it or ask WebMD, right? So like we're really supporting these kids, and this, in a way, is a great way to support them with data. And then this one particularly hits home: events or diet and reactions. I had a student once who was having crazy allergic reactions during the school day, but not at home. And we could not figure out what was going on. And we took data on food every single day, like from amount of water being consumed till it was just like unreal. Anyway, ended up being a gluten intolerance. That was a journey. It took over a year of data collection and collaborating with the parent, the cafeteria. We had to start removing certain foods, like to try and see correlation. That was a crazy data year. But it worked out because honestly, like, where else is a student who is in extensions programs going to be able to explain that they have a gluten intolerance? Would this kid have lived for the rest of their life with a gluten intolerance and sick all the time, not being able to figure out like what is going on or communicate what was happening to them, if we hadn't taken the data and put the time into realizing that she had a gluten intolerance? So, data is important. Take data. Take data like it's going to impact your kids' lives, because it is. All right, and here's an important link that you should have access to. If you click on this link right here, it's going to bring you to the data folder. Everything that I have linked in this presentation is all pulled from this folder. It is an awesome folder that is going to give you all the data monitoring tools you can possibly dream of. If you have any questions about data collection and the tools we provided in this training, please feel free to reach out to your EPECCT. You can also reach out to your ECCTs for your school, or your mentor, anybody who will be able to support you with the usage of these tools. Thank you so much. I hope that you found this training session on a deep dive into data helpful. I hope you have a wonderful day.